confusing. So, okay. We tend to, so let's see, I'll try this. How are you guys?
Do you need the ventriloquist dummy?
Yes, please. That's going to be a lot easier that way.
I'll come sit on your lap.
So there's not that many of you, so I don't really need the microphone, but the microphone is there for the recording. We tend to put this on YouTube. So I'm Damien Montero. Most of you know me. If you've come here before, you know the event space. This is either FloridaJS or sometimes .NET Miami. .NET Miami is no longer around. Did you know that? Do you remember .NET Miami?
I don't know anything.
I am so old that an organization that hasn't met since 2015, I miss. Geez, that sucks. So, FloridaJS, we have our monthly events once a month. We are for every level of developers. If you're new or you've been doing this for a long time, if you're an expert from the universities, or you just tried, something new, or you're an expert that's been doing this for a long time, definitely come join us. The events are usually me speaking. That gets a little bit boring after a while. I'm a good speaker, but not 15 times in a row. So sometimes I get lucky, and sometimes I get great presenters. And this month,
sometimes you get stuck with me.
No. This month is it. We'll hear all about it, but this is a subject that I don't know anything about. And in this field, we need to. We need to all find out all this stuff. You don't need to get the latest and greatest all the time. Whenever something's new, learn it, but that's about it. So, I only knew one expert on this, and so I called him. Todd and I used to have a co-working space around here. By Todd and I meant Todd did. He would hire me. I would come in there. And we really like this place.
Literally about, 150 feet that way, right?
Yes. I don't know that we can spit and hit it and all that. And then even after Todd went to a better location, I sort of stayed there with sort of trying co-working myself and all that. It was wonderful. This place is a co-working space. So Amanda, you may have seen her when you walked in. She runs the co-working space, which is the first floor. The back end is the restaurant. It's only available for lunch, mainly for takeout.
And breakfast.
And breakfast, thank you. Appreciate that. On the back as well, across the street is the bathroom for both male and female, whatever you identify with. It's on the right-hand side as you head on to the back.
By across the street, he means across the hallway from the restaurant.
Thank you, my friend. You can see it there. Do not go outside.
They're not portalettes. There's bathrooms right here.
Exactly. Right thank you for that. Thank you for that. So thank you. Oh, some of our old favorites are coming back. I appreciate that. One of the things that I originally did not. The FloridaJS is my invention. So originally over here was Boca JS. This event space was run by great individuals, and somehow they thought I was always excited about it. You and I would always be here, and they just love my energy, so they literally just handed me the event, the group, and I took it to a new level. We made sure we made great presentations each and every single time. We got lucky with the COVID, during COVID, we happened to already be going live anyways on YouTube, as we are right now. So if you go to youtube.com/FloridaJS, please subscribe. We only broadcast these kind of events. So you'll see one video a month, maybe two, and it's from an event space. There's never something. And on the odd occasion, I'll show you how to win a hackathon and small things like that. So I have those videos as well. From now on, we're going to be doing here. We had an unbelievable space, but we don't no longer have it. So we've gone back to our original space here. I have to find out when this year. I think it's this year. We're going to be here 10 years. The organization has been around for 10 years. It's crazy. So definitely show up, and you'll see some great things happening and things like that. I try to record them. Sometimes I have audio. This gentleman always makes fun of me when I have the audio problems and all that. I should have learned, after 10 years, I should learn how to do it. This one should have with audio. If not, you're going to see a fantastic presentation with no audio, but you get the idea. It's fantastic.
FYI, I make fun of him whether he has audio problems or not.
I appreciate that very much and all that. So another organization I want you to talk about it is Grammar Hub. So yes, I love the concept of, for forever I was like, grammar like English? No. What's it saying? Steve.
It's Grammar Hub is a group of pre-programmers. So when you get a job, then you become a programmer. Until then, you're just a grammar.
Right, because you're not a pro. I went to the event yesterday, and it's online usually. And so, is it usually always online? Is it online usually, or it's usually in person? It's on Discord all the time. Awesome. No clue how to install it. I literally had to install it on my computer to make sure it didn't go down, things like that. So it went great. Lots of fun. They really give you a push afterwards. They're what we. I think what was the idea that all the co-working, boot camps in the world would give them money to like continue the education. Was that the idea? So definitely check out Grammar Hub. Great organization, whether you're a programmer, whether you're about to be a programmer, or you're working towards a programmer, whether you're graduated yet or they haven't graduated yet, or feel that you still need to learn some more, they'll help you with that. So it's a great organization. Enough talk, right? We're here for one thing. We're here for 980 spaces? No. We're here for your slides. The great Todd. I had a chance. Let me name it. I'm getting old if I have to tell you stories and all that. So, Todd is a great teacher. I've known him for a long time. I didn't get taught originally by him, unfortunately, because it was 25 years ago that I got taught. So he wasn't even around. I believe you were still a teenager, and so I went and I finally got taught to teach me data analytics. I'm now a huge fan. He changed my life, and he changed my wife's life, and he changed my nephew's life. My wife is now a programmer. I'm now obsessed over AI and data analytics because of you, Todd. And my nephew right now is going to university. He wanted to finish in university, but because of that. Yes. He had everything from what you taught him, but he wanted to learn more. He wants to get a master's. He wants to become like you. That's the problem. You told him you have a PhD. Now he wants a PhD. On the same thing. Don't get a PhD.
Don't get a PhD.
That's right. What's the saying? My friend got a degree, and they told him you better need a master's, and he got a master's, and he couldn't find a job, so he got a PhD, so he could teach others how to become the same thing as taught. It's a pyramid scheme. So, anyways, there's not a pyramid scheme with developing. It's just money, 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 money. So you're gonna be like the people that build the pyramids. Todd saved me here. Teach us about NextJS because I think it's time.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, Todd Albert.
All right, I'm not used to using a mic. I'm only using it for our friends on YouTube, so hopefully this goes all right. So I'm here to talk to you guys about this React framework called NextJS. And why are we here? Why are we talking about NextJS? Well, back in October of 2021, the React core team rewrote. I feel like this is really loud. Is this too loud? Is it too loud? Maybe I should just whisper. Yeah. All right. So in October, now it's too quiet, right? I don't know. I hate microphones. I'm just used to projecting, but for the two people watching online, we'll do this with, yes, and in the future. So in October of 2021, the React core team rewrote all the documentation for React. So React at that point was about 8 years old. the documentation was getting old and crusty, like Damien. So they had to, they completely rewrote it. One of our former FloridaJS speakers, Dan Abramov, was heavily involved in the project of rewriting the React core docs. And they released those as beta documentation in October of 2021. Those were released to that documentation became the official React documentation in March of this year, so 18 months later. Okay, I'm off by a month, but 17 months later, it became the official docs that you see here. So whether you go back to October 2021 or you go back to March of this year, these documentation now said that to start a new React project, which is what I'm showing you here, it says you should use a production grade React framework. Does anybody know what they recommended before this for starting a new React project? CRA, right? Create React App. And Create React App is still a great way to start like a little baby project. And we teach it still at Boca Code and 4Geeks because we use it to teach React fundamentals, to teach React concepts. And when you're building small projects, and even like for your portfolio or little baby projects, Create React App is great. But if you're building a true production grade application, you want to use a true production grade framework, and I'll explain why Next is that. But they recommend first and foremost NextJS. You can see that's their top recommendation. They also say, yeah, Remix is cool, Gatsby is cool. If you're building React Native apps, Expo is the way to go, which we did some work in Expo today. And then they said that bleeding edge is NextJS with App Router. And that's what I'm going to show you today is NextJS version 14, which is the current version that's out right now. And I'm going to show you some of the reasons why, the benefits that we get from using Next, and how relatively easy it is to build with NextJS. And then, you know, like I said, some of the benefits and why we would want to use this. So here's the NextJS website, and they call themselves the React framework for the web. And actually, I'll tell you, I have not experimented much with Remix, but I have with Gatsby. And Gatsby's great, but NextJS has really been pushing boundaries in this space. They've been updating, and they've become, oops. Did you mean to put this down, Damien? Sorry. Okay, never mind. I don't want to, because I was moving around. So NextJS has really been pushing forward, and it has really become the de facto standard in our field. So I'm not saying people aren't using Remix. I'm not saying people aren't using Gatsby. I'm just saying far and above, people are using Next more than anything else, right? So this has kind of become the new standard, the way that CRA was prior to the updated documentation. So we're going to be looking at building using NextJS today. I'm going to do a quick demo building an app and deploying it, okay? Now, does anybody know who built NextJS? So, well, who built React? Facebook, right? Which is now called Meta, right? But the React core team is kind of runs very independently within the Meta organization, which is really good. So they're not beholden to a lot of the bureaucracy and things. NextJS, does anybody know who built NextJS? Who built NextJS? Yeah, right here, Vercel, right? Oh, yeah, oh, sorry, yeah. I should have specified what company, right? So Vercel, right, Vercel is the company that sponsored the development of NextJS. So when you read the documentation, they very much encourage you to deploy on Vercel. Well, I have been a software engineer for several decades now. I have deployed across a ton of different frameworks and cloud providers, and Vercel is not, to me, where I would want to be deploying production level applications, enterprise level applications. So I'm going to show you an easy way to deploy a production enterprise level React app today. And we'll get to that in a moment, but let's take a look at what's in NextJS, right? And I know I'm just showing you the docs, but we'll do a quick demo and you'll see. So a lot of what they have are things like built-in optimizations. It automatically, when you build an app using NextJS, they do a lot of things like optimizing font files, image files, scripts, and other things that help speed up the download of your application, the running of your application. They do, one of the biggest things is client and server rendering. So with Create React App, you're downloading the entire application. Like if you go to look at the about page of a website, you're downloading basically the entire React application, every page essentially, and running it on your device, and it's rendering those pages on your device. Well, an about page is static typically, right? It's just information about the company. So why do I have to download the entire website and then render the about page on my device? Why not have that page already rendered, right? So one of the things that Next does is it takes your entire application, your single page React application, and it will render parts of it already, pre-render them on the server. And there's two ways that it does this. One is called static site generation and one is called server-side rendering. SSG and SSR. And really the difference is, in one case, you're building the components when you first deploy, right? You deploy a new version of your website, you're building those components at that time. That's SSG, static site generation. So if you have like an about page that's not going to change until the next time you update it, you could build it one time, have it already built, and now when somebody looks at it, it's built already. So there's no render time. There's no time for it to generate. You don't have to download the whole app onto your computer and have it render on the client. It's already rendered. It's already built. The other is something called server-side rendering, which is it gets rendered on the server when you request it. So you request it, it gets the latest data, renders it right then, and shows you that data then. And then you also can do, like regular React, what we're all used to, rendering on the fly on the component. On the client rather, right? Rendering on your computer, your laptop, your phone, whatever. With Next.js, especially the latest version, they allow you to write your React code like normal, and it actually uses AI to look at your code and determine, can this be rendered? Can this be rendered like in advance? Can it be rendered on the fly, or does it have to be rendered on the client? And you can write code in a way where you determine that, but you also, in the latest version of Next, you don't have to. It will make those determinations for you. So it's really cool at building very, very fast and efficient applications. And we're gonna see some of that. Another thing that it does that's really wild is the way it does data fetching. So if you've ever worked in React before, then you know that when we mount a component, let's say we're mounting a list of movies. We mount that component, then we have to go out, hit an API, get the movie data, bring that data in. Meanwhile, we have to show like a loading spinner or something, a placeholder, while we go out and get that data. Then we render that data on the client. That's not the most efficient. So what we can do with data fetching here in Next.js is we can do that on the server. So on the server, we can grab that data, render that component, and now when the client requests that component, it's already pre-rendered and the data are already there, which is pretty dope. It's kind of like old school web, right? So you're getting a lot of the benefits of like SEO benefits, especially of the old school web, with all the benefits of building a single page app So it's really the best of both worlds is what Next.js gives us. And this is just the beginning. And those are some of the things I'm going to show you. But one of the other big things is routing, the way we handle routes. If you've ever done, how many of you have written React apps before? Just trying to get a sense of the audience. Okay, most everyone. So routing is kind of a pain in the ass, right? Right? You build a component. All right, this is going to be my about me page, whatever. And then you have to set up a route for that. And then you have to link to it and all this stuff. And you have to say, like, if the person goes to this route, then show them this component. And there's a lot of, like, wiring it up and putting it together. Wouldn't it be nice if it was easier, right? So that's one of the other big advantages that Next gives us. And there's a lot more. There's a ton more. I'm just going to highlight those three. Really, the server-side rendering, the data fetching, and the route handling, okay? That's what I'm going to really focus on for this demo. We're going to build a quick app. You could code along if you want, or you could just watch, and I'll put this on in my GitHub, and you can look at it. So I'll make sure I commit a lot so you can see like step by step if you want, or I'll try to. I want to keep the demo short, so maybe not. I take that back. All right. So let's go ahead and start building. Whoops, we probably don't want that on. Why is this not? There we go. All right. So to start a new Next.js app, you know, if we wanted to create a React app, we would say create React app, right? Now I could just say create Next app. I'm going to force it to use the latest version because Next.js is constantly updating, so I want to make sure I get the latest. So I'm going to say at latest, and then I'm going to give it a name like FloridaJS Next Demo. And it's going to ask me several questions as it sets up. Now, once you decide on these questions, it will default to whatever you decide the next time. So you're going to see my default answers here, right? So like it asks you if you would like to use TypeScript. I love type safety, but I also don't like my shoelaces tied together, which is how I feel when I code in TypeScript sometimes. So I'm going to say for now, no to TypeScript. I'm going to say no to ESLint. I'll clean my own room. I'm going to say yes to Tailwind because Tailwind is amazing. And it will automatically install and configure Tailwind for me. Would you like to use a source folder? In the latest version of Next.js, they really recommend using this, what they call their app router. So I'm not going to use a source folder, but I am going to use the recommended app router. So you notice once I set these defaults, they become my defaults. So I just have to hit enter, 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 enter. Now also, you guys ever, if you've built in React and you've built a big application with lots of folders, sometimes it's a pain when you go to import something and you're like .. .. source, components, this, and it's this big giant import statement. Well, what they do is they set up an @ alias where @ is the root folder of your project. So you could say import @components, @components / whatever, and that import will work on any file in any folder. So you could copy that import statement and it'll work anywhere because it's directing from the root, not from the current place. So this just asks us if we want to customize that, like use something other than the @ symbol. No, @ symbol's great. We're good. And now it'll go ahead and it's going to install all of our dependencies like React and React DOM and Next, and our dev dependencies like our auto prefixer, Tailwind, and post CSS. Now, if you've never used Tailwind before, notice Tailwind is a dev dependency, and that's because Tailwind, we get to use it in development, but then when we build, it actually builds out our CSS for us. So it's very cool. Love Tailwind. do you guys know why that is? So when you run, when I do this, it says it installed 109 packages or 110 packages. Of those 110 packages, most of them were already cached on my computer, not on Damien's, right? He hasn't built a Next.js app on this computer. Maybe he hasn't built the anything with a newer version of React. So for Damien, he's having to download all of these libraries. For me, I have a hidden NPM folder in my user folder, and it's finding a lot of these libraries there already downloaded. So it doesn't have to download them, which is kind of nice, right? So the first time you build a Next.js app, it's going to take several minutes to download all the dependencies. The next time, it'll take just a few seconds until they update. And we're using at latest. So when they update some of these libraries, it'll only have to download the updated libraries, right? That's one of the beauties of the newer versions of NPM. They keep stuff downloaded for you, cached. So now I have this folder, right, called FloridaJS Next Demo. I could CD into it, and now we can see it's already created a Git repo for me. It's already created a README file and a Git ignore file, and all kinds of config files for NPM, like my package JSON, as well as my Tailwind configuration and things like that. I have a public folder, I have my node modules, and I have my app folder. And we'll take a look, and for those of you who are used to create React app, you're going to see the public folder is a little disappointing. It doesn't have all the things we're used to, like a index.html. We don't have that in Next.js. So I'm going to pop into VS Code, and we can take a look at this, and then I'll also run it in a moment. But I want to show you in the public folder, these are just assets like SVG files. There's no public index. And if you notice, there is no HTML file. Even when I open up app, there's no HTML file here. How's this? Do you guys want me to, let me zoom in one. Is that better? A little easier to read. So notice there is no HTML file anywhere in my folder structure. So the way that Next.js does things is everything is going to be centered around these two files right here, page and layout. Page is going to be my main, like my app.js from Create React App. This is like my main home component, right? And it's got a bunch of stuff. And then layout is kind of like my index.html. So layout, we're importing a font from Google. We're importing our global CSS file. And by the way, this global CSS file, just to take a slight detour, this is where we're importing all of our Tailwind stuff. It's also defining some colors here. And then it has a media query that says that if the person prefers dark theme, which I do on my computer, it uses these as the main colors instead. So it's using, foreground black, background, these very bright color transition, but here, foreground white and a black background. So it's going to apply on my computer. I'm going to have a black background with white writing. If you prefer light theme, it's going to be a white background with black writing. So you can always change that. I mean, obviously, we can edit this file. I'm not going to mess with this for the demo today, though. But if you run your app and everything is like the opposite colors of mine, it's because I'm in dark mode. So the layout, we're defining some CSS and fonts. Here you could see a higher order component called root layout. It takes children component, sticks them here inside this body, right? So here is our HTML tag, our body tag that is adding this font, and then it's going to build our app right inside here, right? Our page will be rendered right inside here. And we're also exporting metadata. And this is in Next.js, we can have different metadata on every page very easily, just by exporting metadata like this. Export const metadata, title, description, just like that. And there's other metadata tags, you can research those, but I just want you to see that we can easily change these. And I'm going to run the app before I go ahead and edit these. Now, if you're used to create React app, what do we do to run the app? npm start. For production, we do run npm start in Next.js, but for dev, we run npm run dev. And now it's listening on localhost 3000. What did it not do that CRA does for us? Well, first of all, it's stupid fast, right? Second of all, what did it not do that we're used to with CRA? Yeah, it didn't open up localhost 3000 for us, right? So this was one of the things that took me a minute to get used to with Next.js was I actually have to go and open localhost 3000. It's terrible, right? So here's my app, which I'm going to just, tuck over to the side here, right? And it has some really cool little micro animations, like on hover, the arrow moves and it highlights and blah, blah, blah. But I want you to notice too, whoops, let me pull this tab out. You notice the title here is create next app, right? Which matches this, right? Which I'm going to change to say next demo for FLJS. And now it's changed. Right? Because why are we exporting it? That's a good question. It needs access from outside of it. It needs to be able to grab this elsewhere to build it. Yeah. I can, obviously I can change the description and everything. Now this layout is going to apply to every single page inside this app folder. But if I want to, let's say I want to create a new page. Let's say I want to create an about page, right? So I'm going to create a new folder. Well, I'm going to shortcut this. I'm going to create a new file called page.js, but I'm going to put it in a folder called about. So I'm going to say about page.js like that. If you didn't know in VS Code, that'll create an about folder with a file page.js in it, right? Like that. Just a quick little shortcut. I'm going to do export default function, call it a boot. That was for Damien, he's from Canada. And we're going to say return. And let's just put main, and we'll put an H1 that says about. And because we're in Tailwind, I can add a class name to this, like text. Sorry, it's been a minute since, is that right? Text 2XL, right? I don't know why it's not autofilling for me. And I could say like blue, or what? Text blue 200, something like, and then like font bold, right? And let's add some padding to this main class. Now, if I go to /about, there's my page. So that's how you do routing in Next.js, right? And I want to change the page title here, so I can export const metadata equals, and let's just specify the title that says about this cool demo, right? And now that's the title of that page right here, right? And this is going to be rendered on the server. How do I know that? Because there's nothing interactive, nothing dynamic going. So NextJS will automatically render this statically. And so when we look at the HTML of this page, right? A lot of us go inspect, but if we go view page source, and if you do this with a create React app application, you won't find the title of the page here, but here we have it, right? You will just find a div called root. That's all you'll find. You won't actually find an h1 tag with the word about in it, right? In create React app. But here it's actually rendering the HTML before it puts it into the browser. So this is a huge thing for SEO, right? Let's see. So there's my about. Here's my about page with whatever, right? How do I link to this now? Oh, and by the way, let's say that everything in this folder, I want to have a dark purple background. Everything in this folder, I want to have a dark purple background. So I'm going to add layout.js. I'm going to say export, and I got an error now because layout exists but doesn't have anything. Export default function layout, which is going to take children as props and is going to return, let's say section, and in this section we'll put our children, if I could spell like that. And now we're cool, right? But now I could style this section with class name, was it BG purple 700, and now every single page, oh, and let's say height full or fit, I don't know, height 100, height 100, view height, there we go. Now every page I put inside of about, it will apply this layout to, but it's also applying this layout. So they nest. So the layout in the app folder is always the outermost, and then as we go into folders, it'll apply those other layouts to all the files inside those folders and then stick the page inside. Make sense? So for example, if I had like a login page that once we log in, it takes us to a dashboard, that dashboard might always have a title bar and a side menu and a footer, and we could put that in the layout, and then every page inside that dashboard will already have that layout. Very convenient, right? Since I'm sitting here in this about page, let's also import, and I just realized because I do a lot of teaching, I have Copilot turned off, and let's turn that shit on to make things a little faster for this demo. And now I can import, well, let's, not that much. I can import link from next router, I believe. Next link. Like that. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And now I could throw in a link here that says home, and we can link to home. Whoops. Sorry. Element type is invalid. Huh? Okay. What did I do? What did I do? So this is when we tell our students RTFM, right? Which stands for read the manual, right? NextJS. I'm sorry? What did I do wrong? link. Oh, that's it. Don't deconstruct link from link. Sorry. It used to be deconstruct from link from next router. Now it's link from link. So now we're good. So, and I should style this link, right? Let's give it a class name with like text, blue, 500. I don't know. There we go. And it's probably terrible colors, but now that takes me back home. Similarly, on the home page, I'm going to import. See, if I did it here, I would have remembered because it just follows the same pattern as this, right? As the one above, right? So I'm going to import link in the home now, and let's get rid of, well, let's just turn where it says docs here, right? Which is this one. I'm going to change this href. I'm going to get rid of rel, no opener, no refer. I'll leave the class. I'll change this link ref to /about, right, to take me to my about page, and I'll change this a tag to link. And now I should change this to say about, and change this to say click here to go to the about page. And now when I click this box, it takes me to the about page. I click this box, it takes me home. Let's do one more. Let's do one more page. So in my app folder, I'm going to create another new file. We're going to call this, let's do movies/page.js. And again, I'm going to export const metadata, throw a title in here, some movies, dude, and of course I could add a description and other metadata, export, default function, call it movies, and return, let's do main, and let's put an h1 that says movies, and my main, I'll give it also, you know, some like padding, right? Now this is not in the about folder, so when I navigate to this, which I'm going to create one of these other here, the next, instead of learn, we'll call this movies, and instead of a, we'll make that link to /movies, right? And then get rid of that stuff. I'm going to leave the text there, but now it's movies. This now, clicking this, takes me to the movies page. No purple because I don't have that layout in movies that says purple. Yeah. So when we use create React app, the most common way that we do routing in CRA is with React Router DOM, right? That's by far the most common. With that, they use the same way. If you use an H tag, it actually takes you like out of your React app and back in. So they provide a link in browser router. They provide link, right, which keeps you inside the app, right? So you're used to saying link to. In NextJS, it's link href. It's the same concept as the link in browser router, but instead of to, it uses href just like an anchor tag, like an a tag. So what's cool is I could change my a tags to link, and I don't have to change the href to to. So some would say, why didn't they make it to be consistent with browser router? Others might say, why did browser router make it to and not be consistent with the anchor tag, right? So it's totally relevant, totally on point. Should have mentioned that, but that's my best answer for you, right? So, but yeah, in browser router, it would be link to. In Next.js, it's link href. Right, great question. So I think I've covered routing pretty well, except that, let's say I had a movie that, like, if I wanted to create a dynamic route, like, let's say I wanted to create a route to movies/horror/get out, right? So I would put inside the movies folder, I would need another folder that said genre, right, for horrors. But I don't know what genre it's going to be, so I'm going to put it in square brackets and say genre, and that automatically makes this a parameter that movies/whatever, that whatever becomes the genre, right? And then inside there, I might put another folder that has like movie slug, right? And now when I go to movies/horror/get-out, it'll look for the movie that has that get out slug, right? Now, I want to keep this short, so I'm not gonna actually go in and build those out, but that's how you do dynamic routing. Obviously, you'll have to look up how you grab the params, but they come in automatically as a prop. Yeah. Exactly. So we would have /square brackets genre /square brackets movie slug, and then we would put pages.js. It will receive as a prop params, and those from those params we can destructure genre and movie slug, and then use those to fetch whatever data we need. And I'll show you an example of that real quick for something. So, like for example, for the Boca Code website, which is also built all in Next.js and Tailwind, I rebuilt the entire old Boca Code website, 298 pages, rebuilt it in 17 hours using Next.js and Tailwind. Like if we go to the alumni page and we click on one of the alumni, if you notice the URL is /alumni/software-engineer/ and then her name as a slug, right? And if we look at how that routing is done here, we can see in app I have alumni, right? /software-engineer/slug, and then we deconstruct params, and from params we deconstruct. This is, if you've never seen this, this is like if I called this props, right, and then said like const grab params, grab params from props, and then I said grab slug from params, right? You can do this in one line like this, which it's kind of advanced for destructuring. You're destructuring within destructuring. And this is what I was doing right in here. So I get slug, so I get that Veronica-Day-Felice as the slug for that student, right? And then I have that, I'm looking through all of the, I'll show you this too. So actually this will save me some time in the demo. Data fetching. The way to do data fetching, we don't do like fetches inside of use effects traditionally in Next.js. What we do is we write this const data equals await get data. And then we write, and get data is not like a magical word, but a magical name, but that's universally what we use. And then we write this async function called get data, which goes out and fetches our API, right? And this is something that Next uses and says, let's tag this data with the tag alumni. So that, and that's just used later where I could say like, hey, update the alumni data, and it will know to run this fetch. It's kind of cool stuff. But this is doing, like, if you know fetch, fetch returns a promise. That first promise returns when the data start returning and they start streaming back. And then we take that response, we do .json, and that returns another promise which finishes when the data finishes streaming. And for most, like for a JSON file, it usually starts and stops at almost the same exact time, but in our time, but in computer time, it's like, months have passed, right? So the first await is when that data starts to return. That second is when we have the full JSON data, and that's what returns from this get data function. This data, const data equals await get data. This waits until we have all of this data from the API. Then here, in this particular case, we're saying, okay, now find from this data, find the one element where the user slug is whatever my slug was for this page, Veronica de Feliz. And now that's the candidate, and now it renders that candidate page. And this is very different than how we do this with Create React App. I would need a use effect, I would need use state, I'd have to set this. I couldn't just use a regular variable const data equals, right? Because React's not going to respond to that, yeah? It's not a state variable. In NextJS, it's like, don't worry, we're going to get the data before this renders. So that data is never going to change. It's going out fetching the data, then it's rendering the component. Very different than our normal React way of thinking, where it's going to render, then go out and fetch the data. So we need that spinner. There's no spinner here. There's no conditional rendering. There's nothing that says if the data haven't loaded yet, right? It is loading this data, it's getting the data before it renders the page, so now we can use candidate and just know it's going to be there, right? So this is how we do data fetching. Now, this particular page here is a dynamic one. In other words, I have like 150 options for user slug, right? So if I want to statically generate these pages on the server when I deploy, I have to tell NextJS, what are all the possibilities for user slug that I want you to render for me? Does that make sense? So like I have to tell it, there is a Veronica de Feliz page. There is a Jose Delgado page. There is an Edon Fisher page, right? I have to basically tell it every one of our alumni that I wanted to render one of these static pages for. So how do I do that? Well, there is a function, and this is in the last version of NextJS. Apparently they've changed this in the new version of NextJS. In the last version of NextJS, I export a function called generate static params. I tell it, go out, get all the candidates, return so I use .map to return a list of those user slugs. That's the full array of possible user slugs that this could be. If I had other params, like if software engineer was dynamic, right? Like if I had UX students and data students and engineering students, this could be dynamic, and I would have to say for each one, like the type of student and their slug, right? I would just have an array of both of those and say these are the possible pairs of parameters. Make sense? But here I only have one static parameter. I return an array with one thing. Slug this, slug that, slug this. So now when NextJS goes to dynamically generate this, it's gonna fetch this API, get a list of all the possible students, and then fill in this page, generate this page statically for every one of those students. It's pretty cool, right? So, and I'll show you that by saying this. So, Boca Code, this website, I have set up a project in Firebase. If you're not familiar with Firebase, Google bought this company Firebase because they had really cool technology for real-time databases and having ways of having security keys that are public security keys, like public ways of attacking, of connecting to like private databases. Really, really cool stuff. Google bought them many years ago, used that technology to create a whole suite of tools like authentic Google Auth and all kinds of tools that developers all around the world use now. They also, as part of their suite of Firebase, created a hosting platform and cloud functions and all these things that utilize Google Cloud in the most efficient and fast way possible. And these are like the top engineers at Google that set this up. I've tasked cloud engineers from Azure and from AWS, some of the best of the best, to try and match speeds with the hosting you get from Firebase, and they can't. It is like, I will put my Firebase hosting up against any hosting in the world. And I guarantee you, no one has the infrastructure of Google, and no one has the engineers that Google has to optimize that. So I welcome that challenge, right? If anybody is up to it, please, let's do some testing. Because I'm always looking for the best. This is what I found is the best. So I set up a project in Firebase for this to be hosted. And now, if I want to deploy, I just have to type in this. And now what it's going to do is NextJS is going to build this entire this 298-page React project. It's going to build it. It's going to decide what components need to be statically generated, what components need to be server-side generated. It's giving me a map of those right here, which let me go back and show you. So this is listing out, this is basically creating like a site map for this entire site. So it has all these routes, right? Like my home route, my alumni route, and then like alumni, software engineer, Max Espinosa, Jonathan Long, Sam, and 145 more of these alumni paths. And oh, we also have these candidate paths. And what it's doing is, you see how some of these have an open circle, some have a closed circle, and some have a lambda. What's that? Yeah. So if we look, those closed circles are static site generated. The circles are automatically rendered as static HTML, and the lambda are going to be server-side renders at runtime. So it automatically determines for each component which it needs to use, and then it goes ahead and it builds all of that. And in this case, because I have one component here that needs a lambda function, needs a cloud function to run, it's kind of funny. Lambda is the AWS brand name for a cloud function. And they're using lambda to represent when it needs a cloud function, right? So now you can see it's actually building a cloud function API for that one page that needs this, and then all the static pages it's building and putting in a storage bucket. It's creating all of the hosting to direct all the traffic between them, and it takes a few minutes. It takes a good few minutes to build and deploy this, mainly because, like you see, the static pages generated in just a few seconds, but to deploy the API to handle the server-side rendered stuff, that's what takes time. It just takes time in the cloud to build that. So it's like we're waiting on Google right now to build and deploy these cloud functions, right? But it's going ahead, it's doing all of that for us, right? So so let's just recap while this is building. Let me go back to close that, and where were we? Not there, definitely not there. Sorry, this guy, here we go. So as I said, we have the client side and server side rendering, which, by the way, if you ever want to turn a component if you ever want to force a component to render, like if I wanted, let's say this about page, if I wanted this about page to render, or let's say, let me just add another component in here. Let's call it title.js or something, right? And, whoops, let's call that title, right? And let's say I have this title page and I really want this for some reason to render on the client. I can just say use client right at the top of the file, and now this component will always be client rendered. And NextJS will not statically generate this. It will not render this on the server. It will let this be rendered on the client's device. And now if I were to import that, import title, and just plop that, I don't know, right here, right? It can still take this component and generate it statically, but it will put JavaScript in there that says to load this other component and run that on the client. So it's like you get all the power of React, you sacrifice nothing, and you get all of this server-side rendering, all of the beautiful route handling, which is amazing, and that really cool data fetching where you can fetch the data and from the server. And one of the great things about this too is you don't have to, like on the old version of the Boca Code website, when you went to the alumni page, it went and hit our API and then loaded up all the alumni, which is telling the public, here's my API point, right? But now, the new version of the Boca Code website, that's happening on the server. My server is hitting my API point and generating static content that the user sees. So think about security-wise, the client, the client's computer, the client's device is never calling my API, right? That's happening one time on the server. So there's no like, if they refresh a million times, it's not hitting my API a million times, right? There's no security concern of them, even knowing the URL of my API, right? So there's so many advantages to this, but primarily, how fast do you think it takes my server to hit my API, right? They're co-located, right? So even if the person is halfway around the world, right? They're doing one round trip to get this data. They're not having to hit my API and back and, do that multiple times, right? Yeah. So that is huge. So if I go to, if I go to Boca Code /alumni/software engineer, and let's just bring up Sarah Koos because she auto-completed here. If I right click and say view page source, right? This is the actual HTML that is coming from the server. And if you look at this HTML, if I do a find for Sarah, there are 24 instances of the word Sarah on this page. If this were Create React App, how many instances of the word Sarah would be on this page? 0, right? We would have a title that would be the title for my entire site, right? It would just say Boca Code would be the title, and we would have one div that says root, and this is how most production level React apps are, right? And there's no mention of Sarah in the HTML, right? So for SEO purposes, if somebody was doing a Google search for Sarah Koos, that page, now Google lets the page render and everything, but here it's in the HTML, right? Everything in her about, everything that that she's written in the about for herself, right? Like all of this is all coming up in the SEO. All of this is coming up in the SEO. The links, all of these questions, everything is there in the HTML on the server being served, right? So when this is crawled, it's getting it all, right? So that's a quick and dirty demo for Next.js. I meant for that to be a little bit shorter. I apologize for going a little long. I had some more things I wanted to show you, but you know, happy to entertain any questions. And well, they're shutting the lights off, so I figure. I know. I think sometimes less is more. So. Yeah, so this is a good test. This is the Open Graph testing tool, and you can look and see if we put like this student, if we put her in, this is what like the Facebook preview looks like, Twitter, LinkedIn, and you can see her name is in the title of the page, right? That is what gets shared, right? In Discord, like her name is in the title. I don't have a description, a dynamic description for each one of them, right? But if we go to a different page, like, I don't know, financing maybe the finance page has its own description. I don't know. I don't remember offhand. Yeah. So you see how it has like the title and the description unique for that page, right? So we can have the title, description, even the Open Graph image you can set as dynamically on a page per page basis. So this is something that we couldn't do. You can't really do in Create React App. There is a library called Helmet that says it does this. I have never once gotten it to work where it will pre-generate this stuff. I have yet to get that to figure that out. But with Next.js, it's pretty damn easy. Okay, so yeah, so let me show you. I wanted to demo this as well. So this is Firebase. This is the Google documentation, which, by the way, today is the first day Google has redesigned all their documentation. I don't know when this happened, but it wasn't like this last week. But look, you now have dark mode in the Google documentation. Thank goodness, right? And so there, if you search for like Firebase deploy Next.js, this page comes up, and this has been here. I've looked at this page. I first looked at this page over a year ago, so this is not super new. But it tells you step by step how to deploy your Next.js app to Firebase. And the first time you ever do it, you have to enable on your computer, in your terminal. You need to install the Firebase command line tools, which I already have. And then in your Firebase command line tools, you have to enable web frameworks as like a new experimental feature. Once you do that one time, now you could just say Firebase init hosting. So let's go back to this project that I was running, which was this guy, right? This one with about and movies, right? I mean, it's pretty boring, but I'm gonna kill the run, and I'm just gonna say Firebase init hosting. Now I already have the experimental frameworks turned on, and I've already set up in Firebase a project for this, and I upgraded that project to the Blaze plan, which is, you know, they basically have two payment plans, free or pay as you go. And in case you need anything that's server-side generated, you have to be on the paid plan. Now, you get 2 million invocations for free each month. So your bill, if your bill ever goes above zero, you're doing something, you either screwed something up royally or you made it. Congratulations, right? And you'll be happy to get that bill. So I already have this. I'm going to say Firebase init hosting. It's going to ask me, do I want to use an existing project or create one? Well, I already have one. So I'm going to type in the ID here. Normally it gives you a drop down menu asking you which project. I just have too many. So whoops. Sorry, I thought I pasted that. Instead of paste, let's type. Use existing fljs.next-demo. And now it's going to say, look at what it says. It detected an existing Next.js code base. Should we use this? Right? It automatically detects that we're in a Next.js project and is like, yo, you want me to handle it from here? And I'm like, yes, go ahead, handle it from here. And now it asks me for a region. Sure, let's pick South Carolina. Set up automatic builds with GitHub. Not today, we'll do that later. Now it's set up. Now it's connected. My project in the cloud and this project on my computer are now connected. Now how do I deploy? Firebase deploy. And now what it's going to do, Next.js, which uses Rust behind the scene to make it really fast, builds this in a snap and is going to deploy it. It's generating all my static pages, all 7 of them. They're all static, so it's just going to dump them into a cloud. No cloud function is needed, right? Well, it says it's needed. Oh, for image optimization. So it will actually build a cloud function to optimize our images based on size if I got rid of all the images in here. And it's only doing that. It's only doing that because on the home page, we're using Next Image for the Vercel logo and for the Next.js logo. When we use Next Image, it will actually take whatever image we have and generate it for different device sizes on the fly as we go. So that's why it needed to enable cloud functions. If it didn't need that, this would have been done deploying, because it would have it built those pages, it would have dumped them in a bucket, it would have given me a URL and said, you're done. But because it had to create this function, it takes all this time and errored out, right? So if I get rid of this, if I get rid of that and change these two guys to IMG tags and deploy again, it shouldn't need, I don't think, it shouldn't need to set up a cloud function. So let's see, it was right around here. Still says building a cloud function. The fuck? Pardon my language. I don't know why it's trying to do that. I'm at a loss, to be honest, on that one. It shouldn't need it for any of these. That's totally bizarre. And then why is it failing? I don't know. Because it should work. It should deploy. I probably just need to update my Firebase command line tools. But that's usually, this is super fast. I did a minute ago tell it to deploy Boca Code, and that did work. You could see when I deployed Boca Code, it did work. And so now if I go back to the Boca Code website, There was actually some changes I made to the Boca Code website a while ago that I never deployed. Like updated a couple of students' resumes, and they were like, "Hey, can you change that?" And I never did. So now it's done. I'm not sure why this failed before, but hopefully this time it doesn't. But that's when you don't have the functions, this deploys in seconds. It's super fast. It's only when we need the cloud function. But how cool is it that like NextJS figures out based on what you've built? You can see it's not foolproof, but it does figure out like, oh, this component needs to render on the client, and this component I could render statically, and this component needs to render on the fly. And if you have something that needs to render on the fly, they automatically build a cloud function for you to do that. That's pretty amazing, yeah? So, on Vercel, this deploys a little bit easier, but to me, Vercel is, great for, not great for like enterprise level apps. So, sorry, what's your name? Yeah. Reggie? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for security purposes, we could use an environmental variable for our API point. In this case, our API only has like get functionality, so I don't care if it like what you're getting from the API is not really that different than what you're getting from my website. So I don't really mind if my API is is made public. But also, one of the things you can do with NextJS is you can create an API folder and have a monorepo and have that API folder do your API stuff, and then your app folder has your routes for everything else. And you can actually just use like local routes from your server to statically generate your pages calling local API points. And that's something, so like with Next.js, you can actually build a full stack React app, which is kind of cool. I'm sorry, remind me your name. I totally spaced it. Yeah, Ryan. Yeah, Ryan. So it gives me two. It gives me a link to the console, which I already have up, right? I just go to Firebase, I find my project, I find that. This I don't find is very valuable. This, and it's always whatever my project ID was, .web.app. So, I've used Firebase so much, I don't even need that either. But it's, if we go to this URL now, and I can also, add custom URLs to this. But if I go to this URL now, which anybody in here can go, you're going to see this looks like a normal Next.js app unless I hit about, right? Or hit movies, which, So there's what we built. I mean, it's not so glorious, but it's deployed and it's stupid fast and it's on Google infrastructure, and there's cloud functions behind it supporting it somehow. I don't know why in this case, but yeah. I hope not. So yeah, so Firebase, they give you a ton for free. Right. So if it determines that it needs a cloud function, but you're on the free plan, it will error out and say that it couldn't create a cloud function, and it will tell you upgrade to the Blaze plan. And then you just have to go upgrade to the Blaze plan and say deploy again, and then this time it should be able to build your cloud function. Yeah, great. Any other questions? upgrading to the Blaze plan doesn't cost anything. You just you're just saying you're connecting this project to your billing account, and you're saying you're allowed to bill me if, if I exceed the free resources in any given month, which if you ever do, it's probably because your site, made it, was on, you had an ad on the Super Bowl, or you had, you made it to the front page of Reddit or something like that. It will require like millions of people going to your site to exceed that free plan. So I have about 300 or so projects running on Firebase in my billing, and in a really busy month for all 300 projects, my bill will sometimes get up to about $250, like, $2.50. Yeah. And some of those are projects I moved off of other infrastructure where I was paying hundreds of dollars a month for. And in Firebase, it's faster and it's free. So yeah, you're telling it, and when you set up a billing plan, you can set a billing alert. So you could say like, oh, my budget for this project is $10 a month. And then once you get up to $5, it'll say, hey, you've exceeded 50% of your budget. Once you get up to $9, it'll say you got to 90%. Once you hit $10 for a month, it'll say you've exceeded your budget. So I just set it to $1. And then if I get charged, if like in the first day I get charged 50 cents, I'm like, whoa, something's wrong, right? If like 1 month I get charged 10 cents, I'm like, oh, who's hitting my site, right? So yeah, you shouldn't have to pay, but you have to like connect your credit card to get the functions. So let's try and bring this down with a DDoS attack, okay? So I'm just going to hit it for 30 seconds, right? Just because for a demo purposes here. But let's wreck this site with as many connections as we could hit it for 30 seconds and see if we can bring this site down, right? Right, or charge me a cent, right? And neither of those are going to happen. So on Firebase hosting, we can handle typically over 20,000 requests per second. And I've never seen this with any other hosting, even like huge infrastructure with like Kubernetes scaling. So yeah, in 30 seconds, we got almost 100,000 responses, all of them 200, right? All of them okay. Not one error in 100,000 responses over 30 seconds, right? And of course I could hit this for 10 minutes, but we all got places to be. And you can see my histogram, the fastest response time was 007. The slowest response time took 3.7, almost a third, just over a third of a second, but the vast majority took under 1/10 of 1 second to respond, right? So you could see it ran for just over 30 seconds. Here's the slowest, here's the fastest, here's the average, here's the number of requests per second that I can handle, right? 96,200 responses in 30 seconds. Like, you can't bring this down. You can set up DDoS protection if you want, but oh, like to not get charged, you mean? Yeah. So I can limit it, I can add any kind of security to this I want, right? What's that? No. Like, I don't, whatever Google has by default, but I've whaled on these things and I've actually gotten way more than this. Like, this is just, we could try this again and again, but I've never, like, I've sat there with, like, I've actually given other cloud engineers, like 2 of the best cloud engineers I know from Azure, I handed them a website. I said, hey, deploy this on your fastest infrastructure in the best way and try and match this. And they came back like 2 months later and they're like, at best, for like thousands of dollars a month, we got half that speed. And I'm like, yeah, this is free. What you got? And AWS, they couldn't even come close. Yeah, Reggie. Sure, sure. Yep. So kind of. So for let's take a look at that Boca Code site again. So what he was asking is when I looked at the when we looked at the metadata for like the Syracuse page, for example, was I using like that same export const metadata, right? And because this page was a dynamic page, right? So before I show you this, we also looked at the finance page, right? So here for the finance page, you can see the title and the description right here, right? And I also have some other metadata, but just for simplicity, here's the title and here's the description, used the same way, yeah? But for the Syracuse page, for example, this is a dynamic page, right, where it depends on the slug that I get, right? If I use if I exchange Syracuse for Edon Fisher, then I get that guy instead. Where'd he go? He left. Oh. Man, I was trying to give him a shout out, and he's not here. So if I change the slug to Edon Fisher, right? We're changing the data. So here, instead of export const metadata, we're using a function called generate metadata, where it takes that slug. And here I'm creating a name, and I'm creating the name by basically taking Edon-Fisher, splitting it, taking out the minus sign, uppercasing the first letter of Edon and Fisher, and creating the name Edon Fisher, and then I'm sticking that in here, so it says title Edon Fisher software engineer, right? Title Syracuse software engineer, right? So it's just, it's a kind of cheapy way of doing it, right? What I could have done is grabbed her name from the actual API and maybe the about from the API and put it in the description. But I was like, let's just grab the slug, turn it into a first name and last name, and then we get Edon Fisher software engineer, right? So now when I go to that page with that dude, right, the title is Edon Fisher software engineer. And that's, instead of coming from the const metadata, it's coming from, because it's a dynamic page, the function called generate metadata. So it's similar but different. That answer, I forgot who asked that. Reggie, that answer? So this is I ran the battery out. Is that what happened? Oh. Sorry, I'm a talker. Any other questions? What was your name? Tom. Sorry, I know some of you I just like Laura, I forgot your name. Now that you said it, I'm like, of course I know you. Ryan too. Reggie, I don't know if we've met before, but so some of you, Edon, right? Steve. You want me to flip? Which is the other page? The other project? This is the student page. What's your question, maybe? Yeah. Let me show you the in Next. If you click data fetching, this data fetching pattern, it shows you. It goes through and describes everything like with diagrams, but then right here it gives you an actual example of this, right? Somewhere. Right here, like get artist albums, and then here. So look at this. It's hitting 2 APIs for this, right? It's getting data from 2 APIs, and what's beautiful is it's able to do these. It's able to basically do these. So you get, for this page, it's getting 2 parameters. Oh no, sorry, it's in TypeScript. It's 1 parameter. It's getting the username, and then it's saying get artist username, get albums username, calling these 2 functions, hitting these APIs, waiting for the data, and then you have artist data and album data. Now, I don't know why there's not awaits in front of those, but I think they should be. Oh, no, because they're doing a promise all. So this is a really efficient way to do it, right? Because if we had awaits before both of these, then it would do them in series, right? It would wait for this and then do this. But with the promise all, it's able to say, go out and get the artist data and the album data, and when they both come back, then return this page. But, so this is like a more advanced version, but this is so like the get data you see here, it doesn't have to be called get data. Here it's get artist albums. But it's just this pattern of having this function that actually fetches the data and then we call it. Whereas like in create React app, right, I would create a state variable, right? I would create artist data would be a state variable. Album data would be a state variable. And then I would usually have like a use effect that runs once when after the component mounts, that goes out and gets the data and sets the state, and then renders that, right? And before, when it first renders, we would have to have an empty state there, saying like loading or whatever, right? So this is one of the coolest parts of NextJS right here. Yeah, Ryan. Correct. No, so like this particular component here, we couldn't put use client because it can't do this. This is pre-rendering, it's fetching the data and then rendering the component like statically. So this has to happen at build or on the server. So if we put use client in here, we would have to then import use state and use effect and use our old patterns of fetching, right? But if let's say we do need something where we are doing interaction, right? So for example, so here I have a contact page, and you can see it's all static, right? But if we look at this contact hero, right? This contact hero, it's got a form, it's handling the submission of the form, it's triggering all, Google events, right? Analytics, Google Analytics events, right? Sending the leads to 4Geeks, right? And so here we're using state, and so if we're using state, we're also using client, right? So anytime I'm using state or using useEffect or something like one of those React hooks, I have to do that on the client. So this whole component, other than link, is a very Reacty, create Reacty kind of component. It's the contact form, right? So they fill out the form. It's doing all kinds of things with that form data, and it's handling things in state, conditional rendering, blah blah blah. Very Reacty kind of things. So I say use client, and now I could build in my regular React patterns. Okay? So we always have we kind of have both tools, right? We've got NextJS. I could do this cool data fetching on the server, pre-rendering, have all these cool things. We get the routing. Oh, and if you ever need to just go back to regular old React, use client, regular old React, and that component. So the whole contact page, everything around the form is rendered on the server, and then the form fills in on the client, right? Which you don't see. I mean, it happens instantly. So you go to the contact us page and you just get the contact us page, right? Cool. Any other questions? So everything like what database to use, should we use TypeScript? Everything is trade-offs, right? Every decision we make as engineers is always trade-offs, right? So TypeScript gives us a lot of advantages, type safety, documentation, blah, 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 blah. But it comes at a cost, right? There's I don't know anybody that can write TypeScript as fast as plain JavaScript. Right? I don't care what a TypeScript pro you are, it does slow you down. And there have been several articles that have come out just this year, and there's a reason why this year there's been several articles. The Svelte team, one of their most recent commits was removing TypeScript from Svelte. Now, it doesn't mean that Svelte doesn't support TypeScript. You could still build a Svelte app with TypeScript, but they're no longer using TypeScript to create Svelte. They made a conscious effort to move away from that. And a lot of companies are actually moving away from TypeScript. And JS doc is the big, well, let's use JS doc. It's a lot easier to implement than TypeScript. You get a lot of the advantages, not as many, but a lot of the advantages of TypeScript without all the overhead. You don't have to transpile, and several other advantages. So there's been, the rise of TypeScript was pretty meteoric over the last, I think really over the last 5 years. And then now it's kind of leveling out. I'm not going to say it's dropping. I'm just saying it's kind of level, it's not on this meteoric rise anymore. It's kind of starting to level off a little. And now people are moving towards, well, if we use JS doc, we get a lot of that same safety with a lot less overhead. Now, there was also an academic paper that just came out where they actually looked at something like 10,000 projects, public repositories in GitHub, ones that used TypeScript and ones that did not. And what they measured were things like number of issues, how quickly issues were resolved, things like that. And they found that TypeScript did have an advantage to having fewer issues, but those issues took longer to get resolved. So again, there's always trade-offs, right? And so Damien, huge advocate for TypeScript, huge fan of TypeScript. And when you're working on a big project with lots of people, you get more advantage, right? The more people you have working on the project, I think the bigger the advantage of TypeScript. If you're trying to be really agile and nimble, sometimes, there's advantages to using JS doc or some other form of documentation that, gives you some of the type safety. But yeah, so that's a long answer to a short question. That when I wanna do a quick demo, like if I'm gonna trip up in a demo, it's usually I'm tripping up over typing or something like that. You know, typing meaning like using TypeScript. So yeah, Ryan. You should. Yeah. No, you're 100% writing in React. Like if yeah, well, NextJS is a framework, but it still uses the React library, right? Same thing with like React Native, right? Like if you learned React, let's say imagine you learned React 5 years ago, and then 4 years ago you got a job where you're just only doing React Native, right? You've been doing React for 5 years, right? And you know, same thing with Next.js. You're still doing React, right? You're now doing other things. You're doing Next.js type things and React type things together, but you're still getting React experience and Next experience. So I'd count them both. And if you're using Tailwind, I'd put that too. You know, yeah. Right? 100%. And a lot of times too, like I've found with a lot of jobs, they might not say they don't even mention Next.js, right? And you're like, oh, I have all this React experience, but then you slip in Next.js. I've sat and my students have sat in interviews where they were like, oh, you know Next.js, we've been thinking about switching over to Next.js. You know, what's your experience like with that? And next thing you know, you're their top candidate because no one else put Next.js. And like they just got out of a meeting saying, hey, next year we're going to switch everything over, or over the next 2 quarters we're going to switch over to Next.js. And now like that didn't make it into the job description, but now they're interviewing you and they're like, you need it, right? And Tailwind and you know all the latest and greatest. So yeah, even though you might not have as many years of experience with that, definitely put it in. Everybody bueno? Yeah, thank you guys for your time. Sorry for how long that. Thank you. I told my students, I'm like, I'm going to talk for 20 minutes. Now it's an hour and 20 minutes, right? Sheesh.
We have our next speaker. So next month we're going to talk about Vite.
All right.
But he promises to do it in English, even if Vite is French as well. Very fast.
Très vite.
And so we're going to learn about that. So we're going to be React the rest of the year, and then we'll continue. We even have some speakers already signed up for. We usually don't do January because it's the beginning of the month, and it's like I literally have had in 10 years we've had like a January 1st event, and I'm like I don't think it's going to show up. Too drunk. So usually skip.
Drunk or hungover?
Definitely come December 5th. To be a free presentation. Definitely, I want to be able to figure out how to, I love these questions. We'll always try to figure out how to get some awesome tools for pizzas and drinks. Like the last couple of months. We'll continue doing this. Any advice you guys have for writing lunch done? Send it my way. Send it to our way. Either you can find us. We have lunch on the meetup. You can find us there. If you want to present, send it my way. I really love learning new stuff. Even if it's something I know very well, I'll show up and see me before. This I did not know. I love the fact that you give us inspiration. It's all right. And so I just, you guys can hear me, and the rest of the crowd can hear me as well. but definitely let me know what you're interested in presenting. If you don't want to present, that's okay. Well, we might find a presenter. I might go and say, wow, I know the perfect person for that. Let me go ahead and do that. And then if, like, Jam,
Also, if you
do you pronounce it right? Jam? Jam. Jam. Reach out to me. I was like, great subject, and I love to present and all that. So, what did you say, Todd? Absolutely. Yeah. And like I remember, absolutely. Like you remember you saying it. No matter what it is, whatever level you're at, or someone that's before that, someone that hasn't heard it, someone that's just started. Well, you feel like you're a junior or mid-level and not senior. Definitely come present and all that. It just allows us to maybe start a conversation. You can come in here and say, listen, I don't know this very well, but I'll show you everything I know, so we're all equal. And maybe maybe Steve will know more about it and let us know more about it. Or we'll come up with conversations. Or maybe I don't know more about it, but I know the resource to find out more about it that I checked out the other day. Once you told me you were going to present this, I was like, wow, that's interesting. Let me find out more. So there's always a chance to get yourself up there. We try to record you. We will try to make sure your name is out there. Regardless of whether the recording works or not, this recording worked perfectly. Your name is out there. Your name is in permanently for the next 20 years after this first 10 years of FloridaJS. You know what I mean? They'll continue that. Yes, as they're building, yeah. Right, because they build it, because they build TurboPack and all that. So no, it's the guy who built TurboPack is the Webpack guy. It's not the Vite guy. No. Who created Vue? Yeah. So the creator of Vue is the one who created Vite. That makes sense. Yep. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Oh my gosh.
What is it? Just put it up here.
Yeah, give me a second, because
You need to reset it.
yeah, no. Yes.
Win.
Don't go there just yet.
Don't go to this. Don't go to this. Now they can go.
Yep. What is going on here? My God. It's this thing. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so